or?
like 3 blocks from both sides.
So from
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa Rudisill, and I'm from the Division of Pay and Benefits, and we're hosting the Estate and Planning Seminar. Before we get started, there are some administrative notes. We will need you to keep your phones on mute. Hold all your questions till the end of the seminar, and there will be a moderator on the line. Also, we would like for you to fill out the questionnaires. All the employees who have signed up for this seminar, there will be an email sent to you, and you can fill out the questionnaire at that point in time. Okay? Okay, the first guest speaker is Michael Kay, and I want to give you some background on him. Since 2001, Michael Kay worked as a financial planner with Prudential Insurance Company of America. He has established himself as one of the top trusted financial professionals in sharing his knowledge and personal care. He's become a national sales leader and top producer for 6 consecutive years. To include, he has been a member of the industry's prestigious $1 Million Roundtable consecutively for almost 10 years. He runs workshops on all aspects of financial planning for government and private sector business, also including colleges and universities. Michael received his Bachelor of Science in Economics from the University of Delaware. He holds several financial management certifications and is licensed as a financial planner in approximately 18 states. Michael resides in Durwood, Maryland, with his wife and 2 children. Okay, Michael here. And also, we have Ryan as well. Ryan Turner is a comprehensive financial planner and active community member based in Baltimore area. Ryan joined Prudential in 2010 after a long career in hospitality industry in Harford County. Ryan recently resides in Kingsville, Maryland. His work with individuals and small businesses is unique because of his structured process and comprehensive perspective on financial planning. His approach to managing clients' financial strategies is one that is holistic and takes into account the entirety of a client's goals and dreams, which is the key to building a strong future. When he develops a financial plan with you, it must be firmly rooted in the soil of your core values. The plan must identify your goals for the future, financial and otherwise, while taking into account your means and needs for today. In this way, your plan can mature and come into fruition. It is Ryan's goal to help you make that happen. Prior to joining Prudential, Ryan graduated from Towson University in the spring of 2008 with a BS in Business Administration. Ryan is a member of the Gunpowder chapter of Ducks Unlimited, which works to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands and associated habitats for North America's waterfowl. Ryan is also a volunteer at Movable Feast, a Baltimore nonprofit providing nutritious foods and support services with HIV and AIDS, breast cancer, and other life-threatening conditions across Maryland. He is also a member of the Calvert Hall College Alumni Association. Okay. So let's give Ryan and Michael a round of applause. Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. How's everyone doing today? Good? That's not very lively. Everyone all right? So we have a long weekend in a couple of days, right? I hope some, we need more vibe. So yeah, my name is Michael Kay. I want to thank you for taking time today to come sit in on this presentation. So one thing that wasn't mentioned on my bio is I work with about 60-70% of my clients are federal employees. So I've been working all over the country for other partners such as Blacks in Government and Federally Employed Women. If you are members of either of those associations, you'll actually be seeing me in Texas. I had a little accent, I guess, when I said the Texas in a couple months, speaking at Fuse National Training Program. So today we're going to be discussing difference financial planning can make and estate planning. I'm going to try to tie in a little bit of your government benefits because obviously being federal employees, I feel that that's going to be a huge asset to tie this in. So there's 7 different areas of financial planning. And one thing I'm going to tell you before we get started is make sure that whatever you hear today, you take it and you do something about it. Because what we find, I've been doing this now 15 years, and what we find is that a lot of people come to these workshops and they go back to work and they never pick up the book, they never implement any of the ideas, they don't go home and speak to their spouses, and in essence, it was a waste of 2 hours of their time. So I just want to say whether you want to work with us, whether you want to work with your personal advisor, whether you call Thrift Savings, whoever you're working with, make sure you implement these strategies. Because again, the longer you wait, the harder it is to make up for lost time. All right, so first things first, assessing your situation today. So what does that mean exactly? That means analyzing your income, determining your net worth. How many people in here do a budget? There's like 5, 6 hands. All right. How many of you sort of do a budget and it's mental? That's myself, right? A budget is going to be the key to financial planning, a key to retirement. Now, I know everyone in this room is going to have a pension of some sort. If you were lucky enough to be on the old system, the CSRS, congratulations. You have the best retirement in the country. If you're not as lucky and you're part of the FERS and you're getting half the pension roughly, but you're getting that match on TSP, that's a good thing too, but I'll tell you, you're going to have to work a little harder to prepare for retirement. All right? And we're going to talk a little bit about TSP today because TSP has some wonderful benefits that I don't know if people are taking advantage of, so we're going to talk more about that. But again, the starting point of financial planning is having a budget. And what goes into that budget? What does it do? It helps manage debt, right? It helps curb those impulse purchases. It helps determine your retirement expenses, finding ways to save more. So I had a young lady come in today. She works for a nonprofit association, the ACLU, and she makes $125,000 a year, great income, and she has $60,000 of credit card debt. And I told her, I said, do you do a budget? And she said, I do not. And I go, well, let's sit down and really break down your spending. And literally within 45 minutes of that meeting, we found about $500 to $600 a month that she can allocate towards other things. She doesn't necessarily need that Starbucks, right? Everyone has a Starbucks that purchase. I went there today because I was in a rush. Egg and cheese sandwich, and a coffee, $9. I mean, ridiculous. So these are things that having a budget kind of helps you curb those purchases as well as manage the debt. All right, so the idea is that when you retire, that you have control of that debt, that you have maybe a minimal mortgage, or maybe it even allows you to take out a second mortgage and buy a vacation home. All right? So, but having that budget is a key component. What goes into the budget? I'm not going to insult your intelligence by explaining what the difference between fixed expenses and variable expenses are, but just food for thought. Have an idea, because variable expenses are going to be those expenses that continue to change, that you're not necessarily prepared for. So again, hence the variable. The fixed is the easy part, except maybe the healthcare. No one knows where healthcare is going, right? So things to think about. Make sure you're writing down, well, what is my food budget every month? And think about it today. So today, you may have young kids. Things may be a little cheap, it may be more expensive with the grocery store. And then in retirement, that might get cut in half. It may not. So just things to be thinking about as preparing for this budget. All right? The other strategy when it comes to assessing your situation is having a multi-tiered cash reserve. And this is where Ryan and I find that most people aren't prepared. So, you have your emergency fund. Everyone in this room, I hope, has some sort of savings account. And I'm guessing that savings account has a phenomenal rate of return of maybe 0.1%, right? If you're lucky, maybe 0.5%. And if you're really lucky, maybe 1%. So the idea is, especially working with federal employees, you want to have that emergency fund set up and that cushion. And what we try to tell you is the rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of emergency cash. And what that means is 3 to 6 months of your spending, of your expenses. So if you're spending every month on your mortgage, on your food, on your electricity, whatever it is, $4,000 a month, then you need roughly about $12,000 to $24,000 put aside. As a federal employee, usually we'll go a little on the lower side, because of job security and your wonderful benefits with use or lose and your sick leave and some other things that obviously that you have that other private sectors don't have. So that's one thing to think about. A second tier, once you get that 3 to 6 months, is to have some of the excess money start working for you. So when this slide was done, tier 2 talked about things that have a little less access, or a little more access, sorry, little fluctuation, and a lot of time they were using CDs. Well, today, you might as well have your money in the savings rather than a CD. I'll tell you that right off the bat. Ryan and I can shop CDs throughout the entire country, every bank in the country, every federal credit union, everything, and there's nothing to brag about with CDs. You're locking money up for a very low interest rate. There's a lot of alternatives out there that you could be utilizing. And then this tier 3 for cash reserve. So once you start building this cash reserve and trying to figure out, well, what do I do with my money? I'm starting to build this nest egg, and I've already maybe maxed out my 401k, my TSP. I've already been doing some other things. Then maybe you can put in some longer term investments, such as stocks, maybe some municipal bond funds if you're concerned about taxes. All right, maybe some regular bonds. So just something to think about is having this 3-tiered approach. So I use me as an example. My wife and I, my wife doesn't work. We have 2 kids, that was mentioned earlier. And we have a 3-tiered strategy. So I have money sitting in the bank and savings. I have some money sitting in some low duration bonds. And then I have some other money sitting in stocks that I can call up, and it'll take me a few days to get to it, but I have access to it if I need be within a week. All right? And at the end of this presentation, we're more than welcome to answer any questions, just because I know with everyone in the room, it's a little hard to answer in between slides. So what's the step 2 for financial planning? It's saving for any major expenses. So i.e., buying a house, buying a car, maybe a special vacation, or education. How about that one? So anyone have kids that are getting ready to go to college or have kids in college? Not cheap. All right? Having 2 kids, my son's about to turn 4 next week on Wednesday, and my daughter's will be 7 in October, actually on my 9th anniversary. So my anniversary is now taking a side approach for my daughter. But really the idea is that you need to be putting money away. You need to do it efficiently. But you also need to think about other things such as financial aid. So when we sit down with clients, we sit down and look at the whole picture, because we don't want to put you in a situation where that you may not be able to fully fund college, but that you also may have some issues in regards to getting your son or daughter financial aid as well. All right? So let's talk a little bit more about college and the expenses of it. So I apologize if you already have kids that are out of college. You can nod off for a couple seconds. But realistically, college inflation, 3.4%. It's a pretty high inflation today. So think about it. College today, I graduated from University of Delaware in 2000, and my tuition was about $17,000, $18,000 a year. I had a buddy call me up back in last summer, and he said, "Michael, what do you think about Delaware?" And I said, "It's the best time of my life. Absolutely loved it. Campus is beautiful. It's a true college experience, and I would recommend it highly to your stepdaughter." And he said, "All right, well, is it worth $40,000 a year?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, that's all in. That's what we're looking at spending." And I said, "I think University of Maryland's a great school." So, or Towson State. So again, think about this stuff because it's expensive. Going into 529 plans are great because you get some tax benefits, right? You don't pay taxes upon the gains. Everyone know that? All right, but what's the downside with 529s? You can't. If they have to be used for education. And in the past several years, they've changed some rules around where now you can use it for computers, you can use it for books, so they're a little bit more lenient. But again, they are limited. So something to think about. So maybe an idea is to have multiple strategies in place. So I'm a big believer in American Funds 529, which is actually based in Virginia. So a lot of people have a question, well, why wouldn't you do the state of Maryland plan? If you live in Maryland, why don't you do the T. Rowe Price plan, which is through the state of Maryland, and get the tax credit? Realistically, and I don't know any of you in this room, I have no clue what you make, but I'll tell you, the tax credit you get for 529 plans really equates to maybe $200 to $300 a year. And that's if you're putting $10,000 a year in, which most people don't do. All right, so just something to think about, food for thought, that do the plan that makes sense to you. So some plans are much more limited than others. Hence why, like, for example, I do the 529 plan with Virginia because I personally like American Funds. As a financial planner, I see a lot more value with what they have to offer than other plans out there. All right? So that brings us into investment planning. And this is a big one. Obviously, everyone here being a federal employee, some of you are maybe limited to certain things based on what exactly you're doing. When I give presentations at FDA, I know they're limited to, they can't do stuff in food and tobacco, which kind of, and drugs, which I hate to say are some of the top industries to invest in, especially those drug industries like the Pfizers, those type of companies. But the key importance is assessing your risk tolerance first and developing an asset allocation strategy. So I would bet, without a raise of hands in this room, if I asked you how you figured out, how you diversified your TSP, a majority of the people in this room would say, I asked my coworker. Or I looked at the funds and I just picked. All right? Again, this is important. Being properly diversified is a huge benefit to you. I would also bet if I asked all you in the room, how many of you are invested 100% in the C fund or 100% in the G fund, there would be a lot of people raising their hands. All right? And in a slide in a second, we're going to talk about being too aggressive and being too conservative can actually have the same effect on each other. So what did TSP do a few years ago? They came out with these L funds. Anyone know about these L funds? Great, great, great investment strategy. All right? Unless you're working with a financial advisor who sits down with you on a regular basis and is giving you advice on how to allocate your TSP and how to allocate your outside investments, I will tell you the L funds do a great job. All right? They're low cost, they diversify the money for you, and they tie it down to your retirement date. But having a strategy is important. So I mentioned before being too conservative and being too aggressive can have the same effect. So let's talk a little bit about this. So the gentleman up top, he is 100% invested in cash. What does that mean to him? Low risk to principal, low growth potential, right? We talked about savings account rates. If you're lucky, maybe 0.5%. If you're really lucky, maybe 1%. All right? Anyone know what inflation's been in the past? Since 1927, the average rate of inflation has been roughly about 3.2%. So if you're too conservative, you're losing money. All right? If you fast forward a little bit and we look at more of the late 90s, early 2000s to today, it's closer to about 2.5%. So you're not losing as much money. But these are things you need to think about. So when we talk to people about TSP, and I see that someone's invested in a 100% G fund, I said, well, you're taking a great conservative approach, but guess what? Your money's not even meeting up with expenses, because TSP, over the past 10 years, has averaged about 3.5%. So it's doing pretty much what inflation's doing. And by the way, you still haven't paid tax on that money. So we're going to talk a little bit more about taxes shortly. All right. Again, now we have the lady below. She has a little bit different approach. So her approach is more of high risk. She's going to be 100% in the market. She's all about buying Apple and Under Armour and Nike and Pfizer and whatever it may be. And her growth potential is huge. She can make a ton of money, But then what happens when 2008 hits? She loses what? 40% of that money. So the idea, again, if you're 100% in C fund, it's a great fund. It mirrors the S&P 500, which means it's the top Standard & Poor's 500 companies. It's very inexpensive. It's averaged about a little over 7% over the past 10 years. But you're not diversified. You need to own a little of all of it. And that's why we look at the slide on the right, or the picture on the right, talks about the different baskets. Talks about having a little bit of money in cash, having a little money in bonds and stocks, and maybe some other stuff, such as real estate, like REITs, or health science funds, or commodities, or gold. All right? So being diversified is super important to make sure that you're able to reach your goal. And again, a lot of people have this mindset that as I get closer to my retirement date, as I get closer to that time period where I'm done working, I'm going to switch my assets to super conservative. Again, go back to the top slot, to the top picture. That's not the way to go. Because guess what? When you retire, if you retire at 65 years old, what's the likelihood of you living till 85, 90, 95? Now, I know a lot of people in this room are a little different because you have pensions, which is, again, something to be jealous of for the people in the private sector. But again, things like your TSP, your IRAs, your Roth IRAs, all right? So let's talk a little bit more about diversification. So here we go. We have this chart. So on the right hand, on the bottom horizontal line, we have risk. And on the vertical line on the far left, we have potential return. So first things first, we have money market. Money market funds. Anyone remember in 2001, 2002 what money market funds returned? 2, 3%. Remember that company with the little orange ball? They would literally advertise a 4% rate of return. Haven't seen many commercials from them, right? That money market now is closer to maybe, like I said, 0.5%, 1% if you're super, super lucky. All right, then the next thing you have moving up the risk totem pole is bonds. So this is going to qualify as your G fund, your F fund. So again, personal belief, not saying you have to do this, I'm a much bigger believer in the F fund than I am in the G fund. All right, I think the F fund has much greater growth potential. It's actually averaged a little over 1% more than the G fund. And when the market's been down, it hasn't had a huge loss by any means. So it gives you a little bit more growth. Then you have the next step, which is going to be your large cap stock. So this, I'm going to tie into your C fund. So large cap stock means it's companies that are invested in or that have assets of about $10 billion or more. So the companies I named earlier, the Pfizers, the Nikes, the Under Armours, the Apples, those are all going to be your large company stocks. Then you move up the line to the mid-cap stock and the small-cap stock. So those are going to be companies under $10 billion. Your S fund is going to be a mixture of the two, between the S and the M. The S fund is going to be a mixture, of the small and mid-cap stock companies. And then, last but not least, something that's most aggressive because we don't have control of it because it's obviously not just located in the U.S., is global international stocks. So if you've looked at your I fund and TSP over the past 10 years, it's kind of interesting because when you look at this chart, a normal global or international stock actually has the highest potential rate of return. Unfortunately, the I fund has averaged what the F fund has averaged. All right? And guess what? In 2008, the I fund lost a lot more than that F fund. So things to be thinking about. All right, properly diversifying your TSPs, properly diversifying your IRAs. All right. So let's talk a little. Anyone ever heard? Raise your hand if you've heard of the Rule of 72. 1, 2, 3 people. So the Rule of 72 is just great. Just good knowledge to know is if you take an interest rate and you divide it into 72, that's how long it takes your money to double. So let's go use the C fund, for example, which is averaged roughly a little over 7%. So let's just round it to 7.2%. So if you had 100% of your money in C fund, in 10 years, your money will double. So your $100,000 will turn into $200,000. 10 years later, $400,000. 10 years later, $800,000. All right? So it's just a great concept that we want everyone to know about because it has to do with compounding, and I think a lot of people just don't understand. So you can do this on anything you own, anything that has an interest rate. So let's go back to that savings account earning 1%. How long is it going to take it to double? Maybe your lifetime, right? 72 years. So the next thing when it comes to investment strategies is dollar cost averaging. Anyone anyone heard of this concept? A couple people. So dollar cost averaging is a great strategy, and we use this with all our planning clients. Is what it means is you're buying at different price points in the market. So every time you're investing in your TSP, you're buying at different price points, right? So one thing is in 2008. You don't have to raise your hands, but how many people stopped investing? Probably quite a few of you. And why was that? Or maybe a lot of you moved over to the G fund and you timed the market and you never were able to make it back up. Because timing the market is not very easy. Not even the best money managers can time the market, and that's their full-time job. But dollar cost averaging takes that out of that whole time in the market out of play. Because what you're doing is you're buying into the market every single time you invest. Every time you get paid, every other Friday, you have that portion going into your TSP. Some days it's going to be up, some days it's going to be down, some days it's going to be all flat. So let's look at the first example. This is just investing $1,000 or $100 over 12 months. So roughly $1,200 in a year. In scenario 1, the market's constantly going up. A lot of people feel, hey, that's a good thing, right? I'm making money on my money. So at the end of those 12 months, you've purchased 81 shares. The average price per share was $15.50. The average cost was $14.70. You have a total value of $1,700. Not bad. You put in $1,200, you have $1,700. I wouldn't be upset about that. All right? The next step, you have that same $100, but instead, the market goes down. So it starts at $10, it goes down to $5, people start panicking, it goes back to 10, and in that scenario you bought more than double the shares. Lower cost, not as much money, but not too far off. But remember, this is just a 12-month period. Imagine taking this and putting it to a 25-year period. And then the last slide, the market bottoms out for 3 months in a row. A lot of people are unhappy. They're buying dollar shares, but they just bought 300 shares just in those 3 months. Pretty good deal. You have 542 shares, costing you on average $2, $2,700. I mean, look at that difference. So we go back to those 2000 markets, the 2008 markets, when people started trying to get out. And look at the mistake they could have made. They were in the second tier, not the third, and not the first. All right? So to me and to Ryan, this is big, and again, you're doing it already with your TSP. But I just wanted to make sure you're educated about dollar cost averaging. So let's talk about the next thing. Let's talk about something more fun, and we're going to talk about retirement planning. So I asked in the beginning of the presentation how many people have a budget. Several of you raised your hand. Out of that budget, have you considered doing a retirement budget? What is retirement going to look like? I just had a woman come into my office on Monday night. Where is she? She's at Department of Transportation, and her husband's at NOAA, at National Oceanic and they're both on the FERS system. She wants to retire this year. She's relatively young. She's 62 years old. They have a daughter that's about to start college in September, and she's deciding she wants to retire in December. So that's a little bit of that kind of threw me in for a loop. But the biggest thing with her was to make sure we had these retirement expenses figured out. Because I already knew what her pension was. She already knew what her pension was because she ran the numbers. Took her a while to get the numbers from OPM, but she got them. So one thing also to kind of caveat that, if you're thinking about retiring, reach out to OPM sooner than later, because I hope no one's in OPM here. They're not super fast with getting those numbers to you, unless you have connections. So one thing to think about, so her goal was to retire, be able to send her daughter to college, and she doesn't want to go back to work. Her husband's still working, so she's lucky in that aspect. At least for the next 5 years, he's going to work. But creating this plan, creating this expense, this budget, is key for her to accomplish her goals. Because being 62 years old, there's a chance that she could live easily 30 years in retirement. And her pension is $3,500 a month. Not bad, but it's $3,500 a month, great, enough for her to live off the rest of her life with her daughter about to start college. They still have a mortgage. Her and her husband eventually are going to start doing some traveling when he retires. All right? So again, with the retirement planning, make sure you understand what's available to you through OPM, how your pension works. If you don't want to reach out to them, you can reach out to us. We know exactly how it works. And determine how much you need. So obviously, since you can't really, we're not doing anything till the end in regards to discussion. How many people in this room know why they're putting money into their TSP? Everyone's going to say, well, to retire. How do you know how much money to put in your TSP? Right? Because most people we talk to, they say, I just max it out. Well, that's good. You should do that. Maybe. It depends. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You know, one thing when it comes to retirement planning, the accumulation part, putting money in your TSP, putting money in IRAs, you don't really have to do much for your pension, is easy. That's the easy part. So if you're still working in this room, the easy part is happening right now. The hardest part is when you decide to pull the trigger and you say, I am done, I never want to go back to work again. This is it. And that's when it starts becoming complicated. Because now we have to come up with a strategy, or you have to come up with a strategy if you're doing it on your own, on how are you going to make this TSP last for the next 20 to 30 years with inflation, with markets that are going to go up and down like a yo-yo, and with taxes. So I'm going to have you yell out for a second. As a country, based on starting at the early 1920s, where do you think we fall on a tax rate level? Do you think we're in a high tax rate level, a low tax rate, or in the middle? Anyone want to just yell out? Middle? How about we're in the second lowest tax rate we've seen since the 1920s? The second lowest. Now, without getting into politics, because I don't want anything thrown at me, and that could be a whole discussion that'll probably take many days. Where do you think tax rates are going? Do you think they're going to go down? Probably not, right? They're probably going to go up. So think about it. All your TSP money is pre-tax. So everyone in this room that might be maxing out that TSP, congratulations, you're doing a great job. But you're also putting everything in one bucket that is going to be fully taxed when you take it out. All right, and we're going to talk more about taxes in just a second. How many of you are doing the Roth TSP? One, couple, two, three. I'll tell you what, it is the best thing that TSP or that the government has done for you all in a long time. You can quote me on that. All right? The Roth TSP is phenomenal. Why is it phenomenal? Because the money goes in after tax, right? You've already paid tax on it. But what happens after when it comes out? Tax-free. Right? So we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. So talk more about retirement planning. You need to make sure these are things that you need to consider. These medical expenses. Health insurance is getting cheaper. Luckily, you're federal employees, so it's a little cheaper for you than it is for private sector. Inflation's roughly 2 to 2.5%, 3%. Taking excessive withdrawals from your TSP or your IRAs, and taxes. So that brings me to talking more on taxes, and the fifth area is tax planning. So this is an interesting topic because there's been a lot of changes with taxes, a lot of discussion on taxation and Social Security when it comes to taxes with Social Security. So everyone in this room eligible for Social Security at some point, unless I guess you're CSRS or maybe offset. So Social Security is interesting because did you know that Social Security doesn't get fully taxed? Only a portion of it gets taxed. All right? And the more you make in retirement, the more it gets taxed. Something to think about. If you're making under a certain amount, you may not pay any taxes. So one thing Ryan and I talk about with our clients is retiring in a 0% tax bracket. And people say that is impossible. And I would say, no, it's not if you have a strategy. I have clients retiring and who have retired that are paying 0% in federal and state taxes. 0%. And the IRS is not coming after them. All right? So having a smart strategy is key. So how do we go about doing this? So we talked about Roth TSPs, the traditional TSPs. So this is a great concept piece that I feel all of you should pay attention to. If out of everything today we discuss, this right here, outside of doing a budget, to me is the key to the kingdom. All right? So we have 3 different buckets. And normally I draw this out, so bear with me on this. We're going to start right here in the bottom right at this qualified plans. So how's the money go in? It goes in all pre-tax. This is your TSP, right? IRAs. Maybe if you own a business, your SEP IRA. All right? Or if you have a partner, spouse, or that's a teacher, their TIA-CREF account, all the money goes in pre-taxed. You're getting a great tax break today when we're in the second lowest tax rates there are in the history of the U.S. And when the money comes out, what happens? It gets fully taxed. It's hard to control your tax strategies when 100% of your income is going to be fully taxed. Pensions, IRAs, TSPs, 401ks. All right? Then we move over to the left-hand side, to this bottom left corner. This is money that is after tax. So this is money in your savings accounts, maybe some CDs, money market, maybe if you own some real estate, or if you have some mutual funds or stocks. The money goes in after tax. What happens every year? You get a 1099 that you have no control over because if you're invested in the market, you don't know the money manager. You can't tell him or her when to buy and sell things. So they're gonna that gain that they made, they're gonna pass to you so you can pay Uncle Sam. If you have that savings account, you have to wait for that 1099 of 3 cents that you made over the year. All right? All the money goes in after tax. Every year you get taxed on it. And at the end of the day, what happens when you sell out? You pay what's called a capital gains tax. And your capital gains tax is based on your income rate. So if you're in a high income rate, you're talking 20%. If you're in a low federal tax bracket, you may pay very minimal, maybe even 15%. All right? Everyone so far understand the concept of these 2 buckets? Let's talk about the top bucket, my favorite bucket. So, tax-exempt bonds, municipal bonds. You probably have all heard of them. Education plans, 529s, life insurance. So here's the thing. How many people in this room know that life insurance isn't just for the ones you love? It's for you as well. If it's done properly, you can use it as a cash cow. You can use it to help pay for retirement. You can help use it to offset some of your expenses. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Roth IRAs or Roth TSPs. So the strategy is when you go into this, the money goes in after tax, like your Roth TSP. When you retire, the money comes out, potentially tax-free. In the case of a Roth, it's 100% tax-free. So my question to you is why wouldn't you be taking advantage of one of the best investment or the best investment vehicle that's out there for any consumer to invest in? The Roth IRA, the Roth TSP is the best investment vehicle out there. There's nothing else that is better than it. And there's many reasons that I'm not going to necessarily get into the details today, but there's many, many reasons why it's good. Not just necessarily for taxes. All right? So just to kind of tell you a little bit more about one. What happens when you pass away and you have money in your TSP and it goes to your beneficiary? How does it get taxed? The beneficiary has to pay taxes, right? What if you're not married and you have a kid that's 25 years old, or let's say you're older. Let's say your kid is not a kid. Let's say they're 55 years old, and they just inherited your TSP of $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. Guess what they have to do? Pay taxes on it, right? I don't know about you, but I'm guessing when you're in your 40s and 50s, you're probably in your highest earning years at that point. So getting that $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, thanks, Mom and Dad, I appreciate it. I'm not going to I want the money. But at the same time, they might have just made you get into the highest tax bracket, and that would be 39.6%. So they leave you $500,000 and you're keeping half of it roughly, right? With the Roth, it's a different story. If I have a Roth and I leave it to my kids or to someone else, how does it go to them? Tax-free. They don't have to pay taxes. So that's just one little aspect of having a Roth. All right? Anyone here, if you raise a hand, anyone here on the old system, CSRS? No? All right. So I'm not going to, if you know anyone that's on the CSRS, they have another retirement benefit called the Voluntary Contribution Plan that is phenomenal. They can, if they want to reach out to us or email Paulette, we'll be sure to get them some information on it. All right, so tax triangle. Memorize it. The idea is when you retire to have money coming out of all three buckets to control your taxable situation. Because a majority of people, and the reason why I like to draw this, is that a majority of people's bucket is right here. And it's usually huge, and this bucket is very minimal. You can't even probably see it. And then here is like mid-size. All right, so what that means is that every dollar they have is going to be taxed. So the idea is, again, pull money out of each of those buckets. So let's talk about protection planning, and then we'll move into the estate, and then Ryan will move into the estate part. So this to me is near and dear to my heart. I find protection planning, no one likes to talk about it. No one likes talking about reality. No one likes talking about death. No one likes talking about disabilities, long-term care things, aspects. It's expensive. It's not fun. But it's important. It's important to your financial picture. The woman that came in today to my office that's in $60,000 of debt, that makes $125,000 a year, has a 9-month-old. She has 0 life insurance. I said to her, what happens if you leave this office today and you get hit by a car? And she said, I don't know. So this is a serious topic. This is a discussion to have. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about life insurance. So who's it for? The people you depend on, that depend on you. So I use myself as a great example. My wife is a stay-at-home mom to both our kids. She worked as a CEO of a real estate consulting firm for many, many years. She worked about 70 to 80 hours a week. She did her time, and in order for her to stop working and lose that income, We had to do a budget. It sucked. It was not exciting. It definitely kind of made me realize how much we spend on stupid things. But we were able to do it, and we've been able to stick to it. So she's no longer works. She stays at home with the kids. She gets my daughter off the school bus at 3:35. She picks my son up for preschool at 12:30, and she spends the day with them. Although I shouldn't say she doesn't work, because I tell you, I think it's probably a harder job than what she was doing before. At least once I get home from work, I hear the wrath of it. All right? So things to consider, though, is that what if I wasn't here? Their lifestyle would change dramatically. She would have to go back to work. And now she has to hire someone to take care of our kids. We've been down that road. It's not cheap. So I make sure I'm properly covered. And I'll tell you, I have, personally, I have several $1 million of life insurance. It's not to say that you need that type of coverage, but it all depends on what you want to provide for your family. And Ryan's going to be talking about it in a few minutes, but we just sat down with our attorney and we did some serious estate planning to make sure that if something happened to me, that she's never going to have to go back to work probably for the rest of her life, and that our kids' college will be fully paid off for. We'll have no debt. Our mortgage will be paid off. And if she decides she wants to go back to work, that's great, but she's not going to have to go back to work. All right? So it's important to review these things. Now, with the federal government, you have something called FEGLI. Everyone in this room heard of it? Anyone know anything about it? This will be good. This will be education. All right. Federal employed group life insurance. Everyone that comes into the government, you get a base of your salary, rounded to the nearest thousands, plus $2,000. So if you're making $101,000, let's just say $101,250, it gets rounded to 102 plus 2,000. You get $104,000 as your benefit. You pay for that. It's roughly I want to say, $15 for the cover. It's pretty inexpensive. Let's put it that way. It's not bad. Goes up as your salary goes up. Now, then there's the elephant in the room. There's that option B. So option B is great if you're in your 30s, or if you're maybe in your early 40s. But once you start hitting that 50 range, that thing starts going up like wildfire. I'm talking doubling in cost. I sat down with a gentleman many years ago. I'll never forget this. Unfortunately, he's not insurable, so he kind of had no choice but to keep it, the option B. He was paying $12,000 a year for group life insurance through the federal government. $12,000 a year. And guess what? When he retires, it's going to be a lot more expensive. All right? So again, know what you have, know why you have it, and know how much you really need. Because a lot of people don't know this, don't know how to figure this out. And if you're in decent health, and I'm not saying great health, decent health. Your blood pressure could be high, your cholesterol could be high, if it's under control of medication, that's good. That's good health still. You could have diabetes. It doesn't matter. Look at your options. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you have option B, you're probably overpaying for life insurance. Significantly overpaying. Just to give you an example, for those that might have kids in the room or older kids, when I was 30 years old, 38 now, I took out $1 million term policy for 30 years. So it's going to last me until I'm 60 years old. And at the time, it cost me $75. Wait, I take that back. Sorry. $180 a quarter. So $60 a month for $1 million. All right? If I was 50 and I was taking out $500,000, you're probably looking around the same price range. Again, I'm not saying you need that much coverage, and I'm not saying to go out and buy life insurance, but I'm saying know what you have and know what you're paying. Because I think that's the biggest thing. I have a guy that's having an age jump this year in November, and he's a smoker. And I looked at his FEGLI optional B. It's not bad, but in November, it's going to skyrocket. It's going to double. And we looked at some alternatives, and he could probably save at least a couple $1,000s a year, easily. And that'll be a level premium. So one thing we do, and one thing your advisor should be doing, is sitting down and determining how much coverage you should have. Maybe you don't even need life insurance. So maybe that's the case. And then what types of life insurance? So the federal group life insurance, federal employee group life insurance is term coverage. So it's going to last for a certain time period. And then once you retire, they're going to give you the option to keep it at a very expensive cost. Just looked at it for this woman from the Department of Transportation. 1 times her base, which is, I think her base was 165 off the top of my head. Should know this, just happened Monday. $380 a month from her pension to keep $165,000 life insurance. I'd say that's pretty ridiculous. All right? Told her, get rid of it. You don't need life insurance at this point in your life. Your daughter's going to college next year. You have the assets. You have some other life insurance outside. We're going to take the 75% reduction on the basic FEGLI policy. All right? Term insurance, you're renting your insurance. It's a great inexpensive way to buy life insurance. It'll last you 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever you decide to choose. And after that, the insurance company says, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. You no longer have coverage, but we protect you along the way. Second is through the other 4 options, whole life, universal, and variable. So what do these do? These last you for the rest of your life. You're going to have them as long as you're breathing, you're paying, and when you drop dead, the insurance company's paying. What's the beauty of some of these policies? Anyone ever heard of potential cash buildup? So this is where I say life insurance isn't necessarily for your loved ones. This could be for you. So I'll use me as an example. I have some variable life insurance. It's invested in the market. I choose to invest in the market. You don't have to. I put a premium in every month. My premium, part of it's paying for the insurance, and part of it's building cash. I have built some nice money inside my life insurance policy. If I decided to, I could say, cancel this policy right now, and this policy has cost me absolutely $0 because I have more cash inside the policy than I've actually put into it out of my own pocket. Or I can say, you know what? I want to use that cash, and I think I'm going to buy a new car. Or I'm going to help fund my kids' education, or I'm going to help fund my retirement because I don't have a Roth IRA, I don't have a Roth TSP. So I'm going to use that as my after-tax bucket, my potentially tax-free bucket. All right, so these are just different types of life insurances. I'm not going to make this life insurance seminar, but know exactly what you have. Again, know why you have it. This is just an information slide, just skimming through it real quick. Prudential did a study back in 2013, life insurance in today's economic times. What's the essential components of financial security? Number 2 was life insurance, which to me, I actually found was a little astonishing. I actually figured that, to be honest, I thought it would be mutual funds, maybe IRA, maybe long-term care even. Because to me, that's what you read about every day, not life insurance. So another slide. People are underinsured, very, very underinsured. Hence this lady that came in today making $125,000 with $0 of life insurance. All right, and I can tell you stories all night long or all day long. Something to also consider is make sure you check your beneficiaries on those life insurance policies. Because a lot of you might have signed up for the FEGLI, and maybe you haven't updated your beneficiaries and you're no longer married to the person you were married to when you started. Things to consider. All right, Ryan's going to talk more about that. So in life insurance, we're going to skip over this. All right, disability. So this is an important topic because guess what? 1 out of every 4 people will probably become disabled of some sort. So what's your biggest asset? Anyone want to yell out? What's your biggest asset? House? I heard employment? Your health? All right. So, yeah, you're your biggest asset because without being able to work, nothing happens. If you can't go to work tomorrow, electricity doesn't get paid, the mortgage doesn't get paid, education doesn't get paid, whatever it happens to be, retirement money doesn't get put aside. So this is an important topic. With federal employees, you're a little limited on disability. They pretty much, they'll force you to retire. So that's something you have to consider. It's not terrible. It's not a terrible benefit, but it's just something you need to be educated about because most people I sit down with that work for the federal government have no clue how their disability works. All right? So for time purposes, let's move on. Long-term care. This is a big topic. This is a topic you read about in the paper every day. This topic has hit home. I've seen it hit home. I've seen what it's done to my family. As a federal employee, you have a phenomenal benefit with John Hancock called the Federal Long-Term Care Partners Program. If you don't know about it, do some research. Reach out to us. I'll tell you all about it. I do presentations for them all the time. They are a great group of people that work in that office. They're very, very, very helpful. All right? What is long-term care? How does it work? It protects you from having to go into a nursing home or assisted living. Protects you from having to go into a nursing home or assisted living. But it'll also pay for you to go into a nursing home and assisted living. Most people I know don't voluntarily say, put me in a nursing home. I want to go there tomorrow. All right? Most people want to stay in their home as long as possible. So the average cost for long-term care. Well, let's rewind for a second. What is long-term care? How do you qualify for long-term care? Cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's or dementia, or if you can't perform what's called 2 of 6 ADLs, activities of daily living. So that's bathing, eating, toileting, dressing, continence, or transferring. So if you can't perform 2 of those, you're eligible for a long-term care need. Anyone have a parent that they've had to take care of? A bunch of you. It has not only a financial impact, but what I've noticed, especially with my parents and my grandparents, is more of a mental impact. Because when people get sick, and especially if they have a cognitive impairment, their life changes drastically. They don't remember things. They need more care. It gets very expensive. Both my grandfathers were in a nursing home. One via Medicaid. One he was a doctor, spent through every single asset he had. And he had quite a bit. And so, not that inheritance is important, because it's not necessarily important, but everything he worked hard for, there was nothing to leave. There was no legacy at this point. The many, 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 many years of him working, and there was no legacy. All right? Cost of care is expensive. Today, in the metropolitan area, the average cost of an assisted living facility is anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a month. Average cost. Nursing home, anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000+ a year. My great aunt, when she was in Potomac Manor Care, which wasn't cheap, and the only reason that she was there was because her 3 sons happened to live in the area, and so they wanted to be near mom. They started at $7,500 a month and went up to $13,000 a month. I don't know about you, but I don't have $13,000 a month to take care of me for an infinite amount of years. Because just because you're sick or disabled and you can't take care of yourself doesn't mean you're dying tomorrow. All right? So just something to think about. Again, you have access to probably the best plan out there on the market today with the Federal Long-Term Care Partners. It's been criticized over the years a lot because they've raised premiums a couple times. But guess what? I'll tell you right now, it is the best plan out there because most insurance companies have bailed out completely because they don't know what's going to happen when all the baby boomers start getting sick at the same time. So the insurance companies have said, we're out of here. If you rewind back to 2001 when this program came about with the federal government, it was through two companies. Anyone remember? John Hancock and MetLife. In 2009, the contract came up, or in 2002 it came out, sorry. In 2009, the contract came up. MetLife said, we are done. We can't afford to stay in this market. Not only can't we afford to stay with the federal government, we can't afford to stay in the actual long-term care business itself. So they pulled it across the board. So if you were looking to buy a long-term care policy through MetLife in 2010, it was nowhere to be found. The government said, all right, contract's up for bid, 2009, who wants it? Here's some speculations though, limited underwriting, and this is where we want our price points to be for premiums. Guess what? One insurance company said yes, they do it, and that happened to be John Hancock. All right, John Hancock at the time was the biggest long-term care provider out there. They're a great company. I represent them, we represent them. And right now, that plan can't be touched by any private company out there. So if you were to come to sit down with your advisor and say, this is something we've been thinking about, we really want to consider long-term care to help protect us, help protect our assets, make sure we want to accomplish, we want to stay in our home, what do you have for us? If they don't even tell you about that federal program, they're not looking out for your best interest. Because I will tell you that nothing can come close to that program today. All right? So with that being said, thank you so much. I hope some of you have some questions towards the end that we can answer, and I will let Ryan take over from here.
Thanks, Michael. Well, I hope everybody's doing all right today. So we're going to talk a bit about estate planning next. So some of the important things you need to do, things you need to review, some things you might want to look out for. So this part gets a little wordy. I'm going to warn you. Michael and myself are not attorneys or accountants, so when it comes to your personal situation, we strongly advise you sit down with someone to go over this, to see if any of these ideas or strategies pertain to you. And we'll definitely go over some other areas that you can do personally for yourself. So, without further ado, what is estate planning? So estate planning is planning for an orderly distribution of your estate, right? It's not necessarily for the rich. It is for everyone. It helps to assure that what you have goes where you want it to go and to who you want it to go to, all right? So you need to ask yourself, do you need estate planning, right? I mentioned a second ago, it's not just about taxes, not just about having a will or a trust. There are many other areas. We are in health and human services, so there are some other documents that I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with that you should probably have, right? The bottom line is estate planning is not just about taxes or having a will, right? It's about making sure what you have goes where you want it to go. All right. So there are a couple questions you should probably ask yourself. First one, who should inherit your assets? Assuming you're married, it'd probably be your spouse. Fair guess. Show of hands, how many people are married in the room? All right, more than your fair share. If it doesn't, go to your spouse and you're not married, maybe you have children. So some questions you need to ask yourself about that as well. Are they mature enough to handle it? Are they old enough? Things like that. Which assets should they inherit? Homes, investment accounts, TSPs, IRAs, things like that. All right. If we go to the next one, that'd be good. All right. If you have minor children, have you set up in your wills who's going to be your guardian? Show of hands, how many people in here have a will? I know Mike does, but anybody else? All right, 2, 3 people. Everybody should have a will. Nobody really wants to leave it up to the courts. That's who ultimately would make that decision for you. If you have a minor child and you don't specify who you want your guardian to be, it's not your God parents of your children, not that, not your favorite aunt, not your brother. The court would decide who is best fit to take care of your children. Being in the Health and Human Services building, how many people have advanced medical directives in the room? Really important document. Everyone should have one. It doesn't leave the decision to the courts. It has you appoint who gets to take care of you, who makes the decision essentially on what kind of care you receive, all that stuff. All right. Are family members capable of managing your assets, right? Like we mentioned before, your children, minor children, young children, college-age kids. I don't know about you, but if my parents passed away and I was in my early 20s, I probably would have spent every dime they left me. Luckily, they're still here, so I never had that problem. But, do your kids have that maturity level to be able to handle managing all the money you leave behind, if you leave a legacy at all? If you guys have spouses and they own a family business, what happens to that business? Do they have partners? Do they have the arrangements necessary to help them pass it from one family to the next, from one generation to the next? Make sure you have those sort of plans in place and funded. Funded would be the most important part. You may have it written down, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the ways to fund it, it could not work at all. Will you owe estate taxes? Depending on the state you live in, there may be state estate taxes. There are federal estate taxes. Probably the majority of people in this room will never have a federal estate tax problem, as long as they keep the limits where they are today. In Maryland, up until about 2 years ago, if you lived here, the state estate tax was $1 million per person. So if you were married, it was 2. So safe to say in Maryland, it's pretty easy to get to $1 million or $2 million as a single or a married couple. Most people's homes are worth a couple $100,000. You add in all your retirement accounts, things like that. So there are questions on whether you pay or don't pay state estate taxes. Again, consult an attorney. They can tell you, depending on which state you live in, whether they may or may not pertain to you. So anybody here ever handled someone else's estate from a family member? All right, 2 or 3 people. Shout out. Was it fun? It's probably more work than you guys do on a regular work day, right? Everybody got tired of going to the courthouse, things like that. So probate. What is probate? Probate is a court process. So I'm going to read you some stuff here off some important stuff. Before you look at strategies, understand how your assets are transferred to others at death. The local court, usually called your probate or surrogate's court, is where you end up going to handle those things. If you had a will, the court generally approves it and then distributes the assets through probate. Probate can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. So, not only do you have to deal with, the passing of a loved one or a close friend, if you have to do their estate and you're their manager for it, could drag it on for quite a long time. And I'll be honest, nobody really likes going to the courthouse. It's in Towson, if you live in Maryland, right down the road. And the lines are really long. Not all assets flow through probate. So non-probate assets, usually defined by contract. So you guys, everyone in this room owns something that doesn't pass through probate, as long as you have a beneficiary listed. Anybody want to take a wild guess? 401k or TSP, did I hear that? Yep. So your TSP, as long as you have a listed beneficiary, would be a prime example of something that doesn't pass through probate. Life insurance, annuity contracts, things of that nature. Somewhere where you list a physical beneficiary supersedes your will. So if you wrote in your will, Bob gets my money, but on your life insurance contract you wrote Jane, doesn't matter what it says about Bob, Jane gets the money. Right? So again, like Mike pointed out a minute ago, it's really important to review your beneficiaries. Most people buy insurances, open accounts, they put them on a shelf, they never really review what they did 5, 10, 20 years ago. everybody's life changes. Additionally, property that's jointly owned, so it's rights of survivorship, passes directly outside of probate, right? So property, physical property, your homes, things like that. Trusts, if you have them. We'll get into that a little more in a couple slides. Why do you need a will? It's the direct distribution of your assets according to your wishes. You decide what happens to them. To appoint a guardian for a minor child, talked about it a minute ago. To appoint an executor, so everyone in the room who raised their hand, who worked with probate court to settle someone's estate, you were an executor. Whether you were knowingly appointed or just by default, that's who it is. Can establish trusts for your spouse, children, or charity. And, if available, can take advantage of estate tax savings, right? Again, at the bottom, the disclaimer, state law may supersede. Consult your attorney. Why do you need some other documents? Durable power of attorney. Show of hands. Anybody have a durable power of attorney in the room? All right. So, for the people that are married, it's probably your spouse automatically. Let's say your spouse predeceases you. Who then is there to help figure out what to do with you, all your assets financially? So your durable power of attorney appoints someone to handle your finances, right? If you're a single person, you might want to find one. If you can't make decisions, bills might not get paid, or the court might appoint someone for you. Healthcare power of attorney or healthcare proxy, went over that a couple seconds ago. Someone who makes the decisions of what's the best course of care for you. Do you need a trust? So there are a lot of different types of trusts. Possible advantages. Trust may help us too. Provide asset management for your heirs. Again, minor children or children you don't feel are responsible enough to handle it. Your trust can dictate professional management so that the assets last. It can help to avoid court-appointed trustee fees for minors. Can keep the distribution of your estate private. So one thing, if your estate goes through probate, that is a matter of public record. And the reason it stayed open so long is so people can make claims against it. So that's one thing that drags out probate so long. It also ensures that your money goes where it's intended. Trust can also help to keep life insurance outside of your estate. If you and your spouse or you by yourself are pretty well off, it can keep the money separate. It will be owned by the trust instead of you. A common term attorneys use is called ILIT, I-L-I-T, Individual Life Insurance Trust. Types of trusts. Testamentary trusts, inter vivos or living trusts, revocable and irrevocable. So let's go over a couple of these. Testamentary trusts are established by your will, right? An inter vivos or living trust takes effect when you die. And then a revocable trust is something that you still control while you're living. And an irrevocable trust is you gave up all rights to whatever asset it may be. So revocable living trusts, can help to avoid probate, asset management, like we talked about a couple seconds ago, distribute your assets the way you want to at death. They're private, so nobody needs to know about them. And avoids multiple state probate. So show of hands, anybody have a house at the beach or in another state? Anybody? Maybe somebody watching us at home. It can help you to avoid probate in multiple states. Of the people who remember handling someone else's estate, could you imagine having to go to 2 different states or doing it all through the mail? That would be quite troublesome. Additionally, it does not provide any estate tax savings because you still own the assets while you were living, right? They're still part of you. So how does one work, right? So you, the donor in the room, you transfer your assets to a trust while you're still alive, right? It can help to manage your assets during life, including disability. Upon your death, it distributes the assets according to the terms of the trust, however you see fit. Charities, individual people. I've even heard as crazy as pets, but to each his own. All right, beneficiary planning. So beneficiary planning, like Mike hit on earlier, and I've probably said about 4 times already, extraordinarily important. Again, it goes back to the what transfers outside of probate, life insurance, retirement plans, things of that nature. 3 common beneficiary arrangements of life insurance. Individuals, so people like you and me, someone physical. A trust, like the living trust we just talked about, or a revocable or irrevocable trust. And then charities. So I'm sure everybody in the room might at one point or another have given money to charity. It is another available option to give money to charity through contract. So naming individuals as beneficiaries, simple and easy, no costs. Can use policy settlement options. So whatever contract you buy usually has a settlement option where you can dictate what happens to the money. Example, lump sum, spread out over a number of years, or spread out over someone's lifetime. Planning tips: avoid minors. Most companies, insurance or otherwise, do not allow minors to inherit money. Whoever is appointed their guardian would have control of the asset. Minor kids have no rights, right? Always name a contingent. So you always want to name a second person in case the first person either predeceases you or was not around at that time. Naming trusts as beneficiaries. A little more complex, can be some additional costs, attorney fees, things like that to set up trusts. Can provide management of proceeds and protection from creditors and predators. So people looking to come after your estate. Seek an attorney's advice. It's pretty simple there. Naming a charity, simple, no cost. You still maintain control of the asset. Can be partial or in whole, or a contingent beneficiary, and can provide an estate tax deduction at your death, which may or may not be helpful depending on the size of your estate. Let you plan and wishes be known to the charity so they can sort of expect that to come. That way when you pass away, for example, a lot of people use churches so that the church knows that when you pass away that they're supposed to receive this money. They do have to fill out paperwork to get it. Beneficiary planning for qualified accounts. In this instance, it would be your IRAs, Roth IRAs, TSPs, Roth TSPs. Extraordinarily important. I would say this is probably more important than insurance beneficiary naming. Main reason, there are a lot of tax implications, Mike hit on a couple, to passing this money to the next generation or to your spouse, right? So the importance of this planning, maybe a significant amount of money when you pass, right? Coordinates with your overall estate plan would be good, right? Post-death planning choices for designated beneficiaries. So you can decide how they get the money, when they get the money, how they get the money, right? What is a designated beneficiary? It's a listed one on your contract by name. So you have to list them by name or by trust or by charity. All right. Did you know designated beneficiaries can do what's called a stretch or inherited IRA? So that, Mike mentioned someone passing on $500,000 retirement account when they pass. If you don't name someone specifically, they lose the ability to stretch out the tax consequences over their lifetime, which I'm sure most people that inherit money would prefer, right? I don't want to inherit $500,000 today. I'd rather get $10,000 a year for the rest of my life. right? Doesn't ruin my taxes on an annual basis, allows me to get a little bit of money every year. Beneficiary options, like we talked about a second ago, spouse, children, trusts, non-designated beneficiaries, charity or estate. So your spouse, so this is an interesting topic. Depending on the age of your spouse, there are several considerations. So let's use an example. We'll say I'm 62 years old, I pass away, so I'm over what the IRS calls my retirement age, 59 and a half, but my spouse is 55. So my spouse has two choices. She can either inherit the money and roll it into her own name, or she can do something we talked about 2 seconds ago, called a stretch IRA. Problem is, if she inherits it and puts it in her name and she needs money out of it, she'll have to pay a 10% penalty in addition to taxes because she's under 59 and a half. If she leaves it in my name and uses what's called the stretch provision or an inherited IRA, she can pull money out and avoid the 10% IRS penalty. So when you have an age gap between spouses, it becomes really important how and when you transfer money from one to another. Now, if you're both over 59 and a half, really doesn't matter. Best bet, put in your name as the spouse. Non-spouse beneficiaries, so children would be a good example for this. Children cannot transfer it into their own name. That's only available to spouses. They would need to transfer it as the stretch or the inherited IRA that we spoke about a minute ago, or cash the entire thing out and pay the taxes. Most people, I would imagine, would probably prefer to not pay all the taxes at once. I usually, personally, like to keep more than 60% of my money, but it does happen. And they must take distributions from that account beginning the end of the year following your death, the year following your death. So, like talked about, they can stretch it over their lifetime. The correct titling is an inherited IRA. Trust is beneficiary. So trust can be useful for certain objectives, both tax and non-tax. You can provide for professional financial management by an attorney, a trustee, or advisors like Mike and myself. It can ensure the stretch provision, so it can ensure that your heirs don't spend all the money at one time, right? Go out and buy that brand new sports car or the beach house they don't really need. Again, it must be properly drafted by an attorney. All right. Beneficiary planning tips. Know the rules. Review your current beneficiaries. Coordinate with your estate plan. Seek an expert's opinion. The person sitting next to you in your cubicle or the desk down the hall, your best friend, they don't do this every day. Attorneys, accountants, people like Mike and myself, we do this every day. It's what we're here for. So, if you have a question or a concern, we might be able to point you in the right direction, maybe able to give you an answer, or introduce you to somebody who knows what they're doing. All right. So I love this quote. People don't plan to fail. They sort of just fail to plan. So that sort of concludes Mike and my stuff today. I appreciate you guys coming out, taking some time out of your day. We'll open it up for questions. Anybody have any specific questions they want answered? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation.
No problem.
I don't know if you have any experience with, people who have retired from the government, where I've heard where when they retire, I'm not talking about it's not a backlog. It's not like your typical OPM backlog where they just have a lot of retirements happening. This is something where somebody might have changed plans or gone part-time or left and came back and had just some changes. They don't have just like a simple calculation.
Okay.
And that it can take up to anywhere from 6 months to 2 years until they get anything really substantial. They don't even get that temporary.
The minimum.
They don't even get that, or they'll get a portion of that.
I've never heard of 2 years of you.
I mean, I had heard about it, and I know somebody who experienced it. I don't know how common it is.
I mean, I've worked with, I'm probably hundreds to close to 1,000 plus federal employees, and I haven't had, unfortunately, I haven't had that situation come up in regards to, I
Multiple
guess
confrontations.
the calculations. Usually, like for example, the past several people I've sat down with, they're coming to me usually up to 6 to 12 months in advance, and they have multiple calculations with them. But I haven't had anyone that retired and then all of a sudden OPM didn't have their together and giving them different numbers. I apologize. I wish I had a better.
I've never heard of
answer for
2 years. I've heard of 3 to 6 months or something like that, and them giving you like the minimum check, right, and then truing you up down the road when they finally get to it. I guess it depends on how many breaks in service you may or may not have had. I think my oddest client in that fashion has had 2, but they were like 1 year and 4 years, and it only took to get a true estimate. I want to say it took us like about 4 months, something like that, to get the answer.
One thing, I mean, and that person's already retired, so now it's kind of water under the bridge, but one thing that I encourage everyone in this room to do is I would definitely reach out to OPM sooner than later and just have them run numbers, at least estimates, because then you could go into those estimates and kind of see, are they along their lines that I think they're going to be, because obviously the sooner you catch it, the easier it is. It's just like Social Security, right? So a couple of years ago, they stopped giving statements in the mail. Everyone had to go to SSA.gov and try to sign up, and it was a huge headache, and no one wanted to do it, and people weren't doing it, so they went back to now doing statements as of last year. But I'd say 9 out of 10 people don't look at those statements, and people that input that data are human. They make mistakes. So I know I've caught multiple clients, I've caught things on their statement that are not correct, where they missed a comma or they missed a zero. So it's kind of like OPM. Even if you're 50 years old, you can have them start running calculations.
Well, it's not so much the calculation, it just takes them, for some reason, it takes them a while it takes longer for that check to get to start
Then
coming.
you'd like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I've told people to plan before for not getting that realistic check for 3 months, 6 months. I've known they've had other assets to use. I guess it depends on what age they are when they retire
Situation.
and their specific situation. I personally called OPM last week for a client about disability, so I'm sure you have just as long a hold time as I do. I'm sure it's not exciting. I think I was on hold for 40 minutes before someone picked up the phone. So, I try and do it while I'm doing something else. It's like calling the IRS. It takes a long, long time to get somebody. So,
Sorry.
yeah, wish I could give you a better answer. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Angela. I have a
Angela.
question related to the TSP contribution in reference to our tax bracket, like when we are retired. Wouldn't it be, could we possibly be in the zero income tax bracket and therefore would not
Have to pay tax on your
match?
TSP?
Yeah.
Yeah,
in
so
the traditional, yes.
Potentially. It really is going to be based on how much so let's kind of step back for a second. If you're on the CSRS system, it's pretty hard, to be honest. If you're on the FERS system, absolutely can be done. You just need to have the proper, there's multiple calculations that go in to try to figure out that tax bracket to get you down to that zero. And without confusing you and telling you exactly how it's calculated and you say, what did he just say? I'm not going to get into it. But absolutely with even with your FERS pension and your traditional TSP, it's possible. So one of the things I'll kind of say, and I'll reiterate this, is that when we get people into that 0% tax bracket, this is them making, so I deal with, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, I have several clients, married couples, and we're getting them roughly about $100,000 a year of retirement monies, not paying taxes. again, it's a bunch of calculations because they're getting Social Security. They have a pension of some sort. They're taking money out of their or their 401ks or IRAs. So, but the thing is if you wait till you're right around the corner from retirement, it makes it almost nearly impossible to do. It's something that we just need some time, and not time like 10, 15, 20 years. We just need some years to plan ahead so we can properly get it taken care of.
Okay.
And I kind of went back, and I probably should have stated this when we were talking about it earlier, is the Roth TSP, again, to me, Roth IRAs, Roth TSP is the best investment vehicle out there. But don't just all of a sudden walk out of here today and say, all right, I'm done contributing to my TSP, I'm going to switch it all to my Roth, because I don't want you to shoot the messenger when all of a sudden your tax rates go up a little bit. So that's one thing we do. We sit down and we figure out what is that break-even point, so we're not pushing you into a new tax bracket. Also, something to consider, which I didn't mention, and I apologize now that you brought this up, is that the limits, the annual limits. So the annual limit for a TSP, if you're under 50, is $18,000. If you're over 50, it's $24,000 with the catch-up. And that's one number. So in other words, if you were going to do the Roth and the traditional, it's still $24,000 or $18,000. It's not 24 and 24. If you have spouses, by the way, that are in the private sector and that have 401ks, they may have the opportunity to put up to $53,000 to $56,000 away in their 401k. So that's another thing we discuss with our clients, where if doing TSP is great, but if that spouse has the opportunity to put that much more money away, we'll take advantage of some of those aspects. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon. My name
How are
is
you?
Tanya. I have a question on estate planning.
Okay.
I'm single mom with 2 adult children, with 3 grandchildren.
Sure.
I do have my life insurance set to pay off my home if I pass. But the thing I'm interested in is leaving the cash to my grandkids, but the property to my kids. And I was wondering about the stretch account and how that works with grandkids.
By cash, are you referring to your TSP?
Yes.
Okay. So you can name your grandkids specifically by name. Again, they'll be minors, so it'll be in their name. So it'll be your name inherited. This is how the account gets titled. It's like your name, inherited IRA, and then their name.
Okay.
And you have to name them all specifically by name.
Each
So
one?
Each kid. Can't
Each
just
kid.
do all grandchildren.
Okay.
They lose that option. It has to be a specific name. Someone with a social security number, essentially. So you can do that, and they would still maintain that stretch. Just remember that as long as they're under 18, technically your kids have some control over it. Your adult kids.
When you have a minor getting money, the guardian is going to determine how some of that money, that they're supposed to determine how some of that money is being used for like education, clothing, the well-being of your child. So like, in that case, I wouldn't say you need to sit down and go spend all this money on a attorney and get it all done. But for others in the room, some might have other strategies in place. Like for me, my kids get they get a third of their money at 30, half of the rest at 40, and the rest at 50. And people look at me like, "What? You're not giving your kids it younger?" And I'm like,
No.
"Absolutely not."
They'll go buy a
So
car.
30 years old, they're somewhat mature.
Yeah.
40 years old, they're mature.
Yeah.
But 50 years old, that'll determine whether or not they're going to be able to retire and things like that. So I look at it as more of a kind of security legacy planning.
Oh, okay.
But
So my question becomes, I guess another question I would have is, suppose there's the parent of the child, is that gonna make a difference? Because like, I'm okay with my daughter because she has my granddaughter, but
But
my
not her.
grandson, his mom has custody of him, and I don't want her to touch his money.
so, yeah.
Trust might be, like a living trust may be a better option for you, so that ultimately your trust dictates what the money can be used for, how it's distributed, like Mike said, when it's distributed,
Right.
things like that. A trust would be the most efficient way and give you control.
Revocable trust.
Yeah,
Revocable
the living,
trust.
yeah, the living trust or revocable trust, yeah.
Okay.
Would give you the most control forever.
Okay. Thank you.
And by the way, as a federal employee, you may have access to attorneys, depending if you've signed up for certain programs
Yeah.
that are relative, you know, especially if you're part of like an association. Like I know with federally employed women, I deal with they have a partner. I forget what the law firm is, but I know I speak to those attorneys every once in a while. So they get huge discounts. And when I say huge, I mean huge.
Okay.
So a proper estate plan, if you're going to see an attorney and you're doing it just walking into this person's office, you're realistically to set up trusts and wills and power of attorneys, I mean, you're probably looking at starting around $2,000 to $3,000.
Oh, okay.
It's outrageous.
Yeah, because I don't have
Really
a
expensive.
will, but I know I want to leave the property to my kids, but the cash to my grandkids, so they'll have it as a legacy.
Yeah, I would
But
I
want
would
to protect it.
put it in your will. You need to set up a will for the house,
Yeah.
unless you're going to put them on the deed.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know if you want to put them on the deed.
And then-
So my point is that, but that could be good in a couple reasons too. If they're on the deed, it could help if you have to qualify for care down the road with like Medicaid, for example, and they're on there.
Okay.
Because again, I mean, without making this a whole Medicaid, you know, there's a lot of rules with Medicaid. So, but you can do it very easily. You can do, not to promote just a specific website, LegalZoom, and you could set up a will for under $100, and it's pretty easy. So,
A pretty basic one.
and they offer attorneys that you can just call and ask questions to. It's pretty basic, and they ask all the questions, so it's kind of like yes, no, no. So,
Okay.
something to consider.
Something to consider. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Anybody else?
All right. Well, we do thank you for your time. I know it's been a long, almost 2 hours. It's a little warm. Thank you all so much for attending. And if you have any other questions, we'll be around for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And enjoy your rest of your day. Enjoy your Memorial weekend. And thank the troops if you see them. And take care. Enjoy this weather. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.